Ben's perfect life shatters the night he finds Mia, his former love, homeless and struggling on the streets. Shocked and determined to help, he brings her into his world, but soon realizes her story is darker than he imagined. New York City pulsed with life as always, its relentless pace reflected in the blur of lights and the hurried steps of pedestrians. For Ben, the towering skyscrapers and busy streets had long ceased to inspire awe. As a partner in one of Manhattan's top law firms, he was the kind of man people envied. Sharp suit, high-rise apartment, and an impeccable reputation. Yet, the relentless ambition that had driven him to success now left him feeling hollow, weighed down by long hours and an empty home. One damp evening, Ben decided to take a rare evening walk to clear his mind. The city's chill bit at him through his coat as he wandered through familiar streets, past crowded cafes and dimly lit alleyways. The rain began to drizzle, blurring his surroundings into a haze. Just as he was about to turn back, his gaze fell upon a figure huddled in a doorway, barely protected from the rain. His steps slowed, his lawyer's mind registering the image as another part of the city's unfortunate reality. But then something caught him off guard. Underneath the mess of damp hair and worn clothes, he recognized her face. It was Mia. Mia was his Mia, the one he remembered from college. Memories flooded his mind. Nights spent laughing together, her rebellious spirit, her passion for life that had once been so contagious. She had been his first love, the one who had never let anyone, least of all him, tell her what to do. Now, she looked pale, exhausted, with none of that fire left in her eyes. "Mia," he whispered, half hoping he was mistaken. Her head turned slowly, her eyes blank for a moment before a faint glimmer of recognition settled in. She straightened, attempting to hide her vulnerability under a thin layer of defiance. "Ben," she replied, her voice barely audible over the patter of rain. The shock of seeing her like this paralyzed him for a moment. It wasn't the Mia he remembered, the confident, carefree woman who had dared him to break out of his rigid shell. She looked broken. "Mia, what happened?" he managed, his voice tight with concern. She shrugged, as if trying to brush away her misfortune like a minor inconvenience. "Life happened," she muttered, looking away. "Nothing you need to worry about." Ben knelt down beside her, ignoring the puddle soaking into his trousers. "Please, just let me help." Mia's gaze sharpened, her pride flickering to life, if only for a second. "I don't need charity, Ben. I'm fine." But the trembling of her hands told a different story. "I'm not offering charity. I'm offering a hand. Like a friend." His voice softened, and he held her gaze, determined not to let her turn him away. Reluctantly, she nodded, perhaps out of exhaustion or the faint spark of trust she still held for him. He helped her to her feet, guiding her through the rain toward his apartment. The silence between them was heavy, laden with years of distance and unspoken words. By the time they reached the warmth of his building, her initial resistance had softened, giving way to a weary acceptance. Inside, he led her to his guest room, where fresh sheets and a warm bed awaited. She hesitated at the door, looking back at him as though trying to read his intentions. "Stay as long as you need," he said gently, stepping back to give her space. "No pressure, no questions. Just get some rest." She nodded again, this time with a hint of gratitude, and disappeared into the room, closing the door softly behind her. Ben stared at the closed door for a moment, the reality of the evening settling in. Mia, the woman he had once loved, was in trouble, and though he knew nothing of her struggles, he felt a fierce determination to help her through them, no matter the cost. The morning dawned quietly, with soft light filtering through the curtains. Ben had barely slept, his thoughts cycling between work and the shock of finding Mia. He went through his morning routine as quietly as possible, not wanting to disturb her. Just as he was finishing his coffee, he heard the creak of the guest room door. Mia stepped out cautiously, wearing some clothes he'd left out for her. The simple sweater and jeans looked slightly oversized on her small frame. She stood there, looking uncomfortable yet grateful, clutching her hands together as if bracing herself for what was to come. "Good morning," Ben greeted with a gentle smile, trying to ease the tension. I made coffee. There's food, too, if you're hungry. Mia hesitated, but the aroma of coffee seemed to win her over. She nodded, sitting carefully on the stool across from him. Ben poured her a cup, sliding it over, and watched her as she took a tentative sip. Thanks, she murmured, her voice still quiet but slightly less guarded than the night before. For a while, they sat in silence, the only sounds the clink of mugs and the soft hum of the city outside. Finally, Mia spoke, her gaze fixed on her coffee. So, you're still in New York then? Ben chuckled, though the sound was tinged with a sadness he hadn't realized he felt. Yeah, still here. And you? He stopped himself, unsure how to even ask what he really wanted to know. Mia looked down, fidgeting with her mug. I've been here and there. Tried a few things. Nothing really. Stuck? She looked away, clearly struggling to find the words. The faint remnants of Mia's pride were evident, her reluctance to reveal just how much life had beaten her down. Ben wanted to push, to understand everything she had been through, but he sensed it was too soon. Instead, he decided to shift the conversation. Do you remember the time you convinced me to skip finals to go to that art exhibit? He asked, a nostalgic smile playing on his lips. Mia's face softened, a hint of the old Mia emerging as she chuckled. Yes, you were so tense, like I was dragging you to a crime scene. She shook her head, an amused glint in her eyes. But you enjoyed it, didn't you? He grinned. Yeah, I guess I did. You always had that way of pulling me out of my comfort zone. The moment hung between them, and for a split second, Ben could see the vibrant woman she used to be. But then her expression darkened, and she lowered her gaze. I miss that version of me, you know, she admitted softly. Ben leaned forward, his tone filled with warmth. Maybe she's still in there. Maybe she just needs a little help finding her way back. Mia looked at him, her eyes a mixture of gratitude and wariness. Ben, I appreciate everything you're doing, but I don't want to become dependent. Her voice was firm, but he could hear the underlying fear. He nodded. Then let me help you get back on your feet. No strings attached. She watched him carefully, searching his face as if to make sure he was genuine. After a long moment, she nodded, the tiniest flicker of hope crossing her features. Okay, but it's just temporary. Of course, he assured her, though a part of him hoped that maybe, just maybe, she would stay longer. Over the next few days, Ben set aside his work as much as he could, spending most of his free time with Mia. They began tackling her immediate needs, getting her some clothes, sorting out her documents, and arranging temporary assistance through a few contacts he knew. One evening, as they sat in his living room, Mia finally opened up a little more. I started my own business a few years back, she revealed. I thought it was going to be amazing. I wanted to make a difference, you know? But things didn't go as planned. Some mistakes, bad partnerships. I lost everything. Her eyes grew distant, lost in memories that Ben could tell were painful. After that, I tried to go back to my family, but they're not in my life anymore. Too many bridges burned. Ben's heart ached for her. He knew Mia had always been fiercely independent, unwilling to rely on anyone else's support. The idea of her feeling trapped, with no one to turn to, was heartbreaking. I'm sorry, Mia, he said quietly, reaching out to place a reassuring hand on her shoulder. I wish you'd reached out sooner. Mia shook her head, her expression filled with self-reproach. I didn't want to bring anyone down with me. I thought I could handle it, and then I couldn't. Her voice trailed off, and for the first time, Ben saw the full weight of her loneliness and despair. You're not alone now, he reminded her softly. We'll get through this, one step at a time. The next morning, Ben was already at his desk, researching ways to clear her debts and help her get back on her feet. He made calls to a few contacts in the finance industry and reached out to some nonprofits that might have resources for people in her situation. He spent the day balancing his work obligations with his determination to find Mia the support she needed. When he returned home that evening, Mia greeted him with a cautious smile, her eyes brighter than they had been in weeks. Thank you, Ben. I know it's not easy, but it's nice to have someone in my corner, she admitted, her voice soft but sincere. Always, he replied, smiling back. And for the first time in a long time, Ben felt that his life had a purpose beyond work, a purpose that was somehow more meaningful. Unbeknownst to either of them, the road ahead would be more challenging than they could imagine. But for now, they had each other, and that was enough. Weeks passed, and Mia began to regain a bit of her old self, thanks to Ben's steady support. Although still reserved about her struggles, she started sharing bits and pieces of her past, gradually allowing Ben into the world she had shielded from everyone else. Ben, in turn, found himself feeling less like the detached attorney and more like the young, hopeful man he had once been with her. For the first time in years, he was looking at life beyond courtrooms and deadlines. One evening, Ben came home with a folder filled with documents and a proposal he had been working on. He found Mia in the living room, flipping through a book he had recommended. She looked up when he entered, her expression warm but curious as she noticed the stack of papers in his hands. "Big day at work?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "Actually, this is something I wanted to talk to you about," Ben replied, setting the papers down on the coffee table. "I know you've been trying to get back on your feet, and I've been doing some thinking." Mia's eyes narrowed slightly, her defenses instinctively rising. "What kind of thinking?" He smiled reassuringly. "Nothing extreme, I promise. I was just inspired by what you went through and by the strength you've shown. It got me wondering how many people are out there trying to rebuild their lives without any real support." Mia listened, her face softening as he spoke. "What do you mean, Ben?" He leaned forward, tapping the stack of papers. "I want to start something called the Open Doors Initiative. It would be a non-profit organization focused on helping people like you, people who've faced setbacks and need guidance to rebuild their lives." The words hung in the air, and Mia's face lit up with a spark Ben hadn't seen in a long time. "Ben, that sounds incredible. You really want to do this?" "I do," he answered, his voice filled with conviction. "But I don't want to do it alone. I was hoping you'd join me, help me set it up, and be a part of the mission." Mia was quiet for a moment, looking down at her hands. Ben saw her take a deep breath, her usual hesitation and pride surfacing. "Ben, I don't know. I mean, I've barely figured my own life out. That's exactly why you'd be perfect for this," he said, his tone gentle but insistent. "You understand what it's like to lose everything and fight to come back. Your perspective could help make this foundation something real, something that connects with people on a personal level." Mia's eyes softened, and after a moment, she nodded. "All right, let's do it." Over the next few weeks, they dove headfirst into planning. They sketched out ideas for programs, talked about outreach strategies, and listed potential partners who could help make their vision a reality. Ben was amazed at Mia's insight and her ability to connect their ideas to the real needs of struggling individuals. She threw herself into the work with a passion that reminded him of her younger self, and soon enough, the Open Doors Initiative began to take shape. But their enthusiasm wasn't without obstacles. At Ben's law firm, his partners began noticing his shift in focus. They were used to him being their rock, the go-to guy who never wavered from the firm's high-stakes cases. Now, however, he was constantly tied up with nonprofit meetings, emails, and planning sessions with Mia. One morning, Peter, a senior partner and Ben's close friend, stopped him outside his office. "Ben, can we talk?" Peter's voice was casual, but his expression was anything but. "Of course," Ben replied, though he could feel tension simmering beneath Peter's tone. They stepped into Peter's office, where Peter closed the door and turned to him, arms crossed. "What's going on with you lately? You're barely around, and when you are, it's like your mind is somewhere else. The partners are starting to wonder if this new project of yours is distracting you from the firm." Ben sighed, understanding where Peter was coming from. "Peter, I know I've been split lately, but this project is important. It's helping people who've been through tough times, giving them a way to get back on track." Peter studied him for a long moment before speaking. "Look, I get it, Ben. You're passionate about this, but we can't afford to lose you to something that doesn't bring in revenue for the firm. We've got clients counting on you." Ben's jaw tightened. "This isn't about money, Peter. I'm doing something meaningful here. Something that makes me feel like I'm actually making a difference, not just chasing billable hours." Peter sighed, his tone softening slightly. I understand that, Ben, but remember what we built together. This firm needs you, and you've always been a rock for us. The conversation left Ben feeling torn. On one hand, he knew the firm had been his life's work, but on the other, he couldn't shake the sense of purpose that the Open Doors initiative had given him. Returning home that night, he shared his worries with Mia, who listened intently. "I'm sorry, Ben," she said softly. "I never wanted to cause any trouble for you." He shook his head. "This isn't your fault. I chose this because I wanted to do something more, something that matters." He paused, glancing at her. "And honestly, it's been worth it." Mia smiled, though concern lingered in her eyes. "I just don't want you to lose everything you worked for." Ben reached over, placing a reassuring hand on hers. "Maybe it's time I redefined what I'm working for." The words came out more confidently than he felt, but he knew they were true. Unbeknownst to them, Peter's concerns would soon ripple out, stirring tension among the firm's partners and testing Ben's resolve to stand by his new vision. But for now, the purpose and connection he felt outweighed the doubts in his mind. Together, he and Mia continued building the foundation that was slowly transforming them both. As the Open Doors initiative gained traction, Ben's life became a balancing act. He spent his days at the law firm, navigating demanding cases and managing client expectations, but every free moment was devoted to the nonprofit. Mia and Ben worked late into the evenings, brainstorming ideas and reaching out to potential donors, trying to turn their vision into a lifeline for people like Mia who needed a fresh start. One evening, as they sat among stacks of paperwork in Ben's living room, he received a call from Peter. With a deep breath, Ben answered, watching Mia as she sorted through files with intense focus. "Hey, Ben." Peter's voice was calm, but there was a formality to it that Ben had started to recognize. "We need to talk about some things regarding your commitment to the firm." Ben's stomach tightened, but he kept his tone light. "Sure, Peter. I'll come by your office tomorrow." The next morning, Ben entered Peter's office, finding not only Peter, but also two other partners seated around the table. He felt the tension immediately, an unspoken message hanging in the air. Peter motioned for him to sit, his face carefully neutral. "Ben, we're concerned about your focus. The Open Doors initiative has been taking up a lot of your time, and it's becoming noticeable." One of the partners, Rachel, chimed in. "Clients have been asking for you, Ben. They're used to having your full attention. The firm relies on you as a leader, and we're worried this nonprofit is creating a distraction." Ben took a deep breath, choosing his words carefully. "I understand your concerns, and I know my involvement has shifted lately, but this project is incredibly important to me. It's a chance to give back, to help people who don't have anyone in their corner. I believe we can find a balance that allows me to be there for both the firm and the foundation." Peter exchanged a glance with Rachel, then leaned forward. "Ben, we're willing to support you on this, but only if you can assure us that the firm remains your top priority. We've worked hard to get here, and it would be a shame to jeopardize that now." The discussion left Ben feeling uneasy, yet he knew he couldn't abandon the foundation. He returned home that night feeling the weight of the decision pressing down on him. Mia noticed the tension as soon as he walked in. "What happened?" she asked softly, putting down her work. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "The partners, they're not happy about my commitment to the foundation. They think it's affecting my work." Mia's face fell, and she looked away, guilt flickering in her eyes. "I'm sorry, Ben. I never wanted you to have to choose between this and your career." Ben shook his head. "This isn't on you, Mia. I believe in what we're doing, and I don't want to give it up." He hesitated, then added, "Peter suggested something, though. He wants me to consider marrying Rachel, his sister. She has connections and could help fund the initiative. He thinks it would help balance things." Mia's expression froze, and Ben saw a flash of hurt cross her face before she quickly looked away. "And you're considering it?" He sighed, the weight of the dilemma pressing down on him. "I don't know, Mia. Rachel's a good person, and she could bring a lot of support to the foundation. But it's complicated." Mia stood, crossing her arms as if shielding herself from the conversation. "I see. Well, if it helps keep the foundation going, then I guess you should do what you have to." Ben took a step toward her, sensing the tension between them. Mia, this isn't what I want. I don't want to lose everything we've worked for. Mia forced a small smile, her eyes unreadable. I understand. It's fine, Ben. Really. The next few days were tense. Ben tried to keep things normal, but he felt the distance growing between them. Then one evening, Rachel came by to discuss her potential involvement with the foundation. She was polite and friendly, and as they talked, Ben could see how her support could benefit the nonprofit. However, his heart wasn't in it, and he struggled with the thought of going through with a marriage that felt like a business arrangement. Rachel, sensing his hesitation, finally spoke up. Ben, I know you're only considering this because Peter pressured you. And honestly, I have my own reasons for hesitating. I've been offered a career opportunity abroad, and I'd rather pursue that than settle here. She gave him an understanding smile. I think you should be with someone who truly wants to be by your side, not just someone who fits a plan. Relief washed over Ben as he realized he didn't have to go through with the arrangement. Thank you, Rachel. I didn't want to push either of us into something that didn't feel right. She smiled, extending her hand. Go build your foundation, Ben, and make sure it's with someone who shares your passion. As soon as Rachel left, Ben felt a weight lift from his shoulders. He needed to talk to Mia and clear the air. Finding her in the living room, he approached, his voice gentle. Mia, the engagement with Rachel, it's not happening. She's moving abroad, and she deserves to pursue her dreams. Mia looked up, surprise and relief flickering in her expression. Oh, I didn't realize she had other plans. Ben nodded, a warm smile spreading across his face. Mia, you're the one I want to work with on this. You're the one who understands why this is so important. Mia's gaze softened, her defenses melting as she held his gaze. Ben, I've wanted to be here with you from the beginning. I didn't know if that was enough. It's more than enough, he replied, stepping closer. Together, we can make this foundation something truly meaningful. For the first time in days, Mia smiled, and Ben felt the tension between them dissolve. The path ahead was still uncertain, but now, with Mia by his side, he felt ready to face it. With the engagement proposal behind him, Ben threw himself into the work of the Open Doors initiative with renewed energy, grateful to be moving forward without the weight of the firm's expectations pressing him into a corner. He and Mia worked closely, meeting with potential donors, establishing partnerships, and developing programs for individuals in need. Each day brought new challenges, but also a shared purpose that made the long hours fulfilling. One afternoon, after a particularly successful meeting with a local business owner interested in sponsoring their employment program, Mia surprised Ben with some news of her own. She had received a letter from a former business partner, informing her that the small art business she had once co-owned was not only still operational, but was actually thriving. The new management was open to offering Mia a settlement for her original share in the business. I wasn't expecting it, she said, her voice a mixture of surprise and excitement as she showed him the letter. It's enough to give me some real stability. Ben's face lit up with genuine happiness. That's incredible, Mia. You deserve this. He placed a hand on her shoulder, smiling warmly. Finally, something's going your way. Mia returned his smile, a weight visibly lifted from her. It feels strange. For so long, I didn't think any good would come out of everything that happened. But maybe this is a sign, you know? A sign that it's time for me to move forward. Ben nodded, sensing a newfound confidence in her voice. Absolutely. And it also means you'll have some flexibility. You can work with us at the foundation without the pressure to find something else right away. Mia's eyes brightened. You're right. I want to stay here, Ben. I want to keep working on this with you. For the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm doing something that matters. Their partnership grew stronger as they poured their energy into the foundation's mission. Together, they organized events, recruited volunteers, and developed a network of mentors for people starting new lives. With each step, they became more than colleagues or old friends. They became each other's anchor, a steadying force in the journey they had begun together. But the excitement wasn't without its own shadows. Late one evening, as they were wrapping up a strategy meeting in Ben's office, his phone buzzed with an unknown number. Ben glanced at it, about to silence it, but something made him pause. He answered, his voice cautious. "Ben, it's Marcus," the voice on the other end said. Ben's face tightened, and he turned slightly, stepping away from Mia's line of sight. "I'm back in town," Marcus continued, his tone smug. "I thought you'd want to know." Ben felt a surge of unease as he gripped the phone. "What do you want, Marcus?" he asked, keeping his voice steady. "I'm just curious if your new venture would want the public hearing about a few cases from your early years," Marcus replied, his voice dripping with threat. "Or maybe I should just come by and visit. I'm sure Mia would love to meet me." Ben's grip on the phone tightened. He hadn't seen Marcus in years, not since they had a falling out over some ethically questionable cases that Ben, in his early career, had regrettably taken on. Marcus, his estranged half-brother, had always been ready to exploit any vulnerability, and now he seemed intent on stirring up trouble. "Stay away from Mia," Ben said, his voice low and firm. "Whatever you think you can gain from this, it won't work." Marcus chuckled. "We'll see, but I wouldn't be so sure if I were you. It would be a shame if the truth came out right when you're trying to play the hero, wouldn't it?" The call ended, leaving Ben tense and unsettled. He turned back to see Mia watching him with a questioning look, clearly sensing the tension. "Who was that?" she asked gently. Ben took a deep breath, considering what to tell her. "That was my half-brother, Marcus. We're not close. In fact, we haven't spoken in years. He's someone I'd rather keep out of my life." Mia studied his face, concern in her eyes. "Is he okay?" He sounded intense. Ben hesitated, then decided it was time to be honest. "Marcus knows about some cases from early in my career. Cases I'm not proud of. He's threatening to use them against me now, just as we're getting the foundation off the ground." Mia stepped closer, her expression firm. "Ben, if you're being blackmailed, you can't face this alone. Whatever mistakes you made back then, that doesn't define who you are now." He looked into her eyes, feeling a surge of gratitude for her unwavering support. "I don't want to drag you into this, Mia. You've been through enough already." Mia shook her head. "You've been here for me through everything. Let me be here for you too." Her words broke through his last barrier of hesitation. "All right," he said, his voice softened by relief. "There's more to this than I wanted anyone to know, but maybe it's time to stop hiding it." Over the next few days, Ben prepared himself for a potential confrontation with Marcus. He gathered records and documented the details of the cases in question, ready to face the consequences if it came to that. He also met with his partners at the law firm, taking them into confidence about his past decisions and his intention to publicly address them if necessary. The night before he planned to confront Marcus, Ben and Mia shared a quiet dinner together. As they sat across the table, he felt a profound sense of peace, knowing he didn't have to carry the burden alone. "Whatever happens tomorrow, thank you, Mia," he said, reaching for her hand. "I don't think I could do this without you." Mia squeezed his hand, her gaze steady. "You don't have to. You're not alone in this, Ben." The next day, Ben met Marcus in a small cafe, the air thick with unspoken tension. Marcus, wearing his usual self-satisfied smirk, looked as though he expected Ben to beg or negotiate. But as they sat down, Ben surprised him by calmly laying out his intentions. "I'm ready to address what I did back then, publicly if necessary," Ben said, meeting Marcus's gaze without flinching. "You can't use this against me anymore." Marcus's smirk faltered, replaced by a look of frustration. "You think you can just walk away from your past? It'll ruin you." "Maybe," Ben replied calmly, "but I'd rather face the truth and deal with the fallout than let you hold it over me. I'm done hiding." The confrontation left Marcus visibly shaken, and as Ben stood to leave, he felt lighter than he had in years. He returned to the foundation later that afternoon, where Mia was waiting, relief flooding her face when she saw him. "It's over," he said, his smile finally free of worry. "Marcus won't be a problem anymore." Mia embraced him, and for the first time, Ben felt that they were truly free to focus on their future. Together, they had faced down his past and emerged stronger, ready to move forward with the foundation and, perhaps, with each other. With the ordeal behind him, Ben threw himself into his work at the Open Doors initiative with a clear mind and a renewed focus. The weight of his past no longer haunted him, and for the first time, he felt at peace. He and Mia worked together seamlessly, their shared passion for helping others binding them closer. Mia was his confidant, his partner, and, increasingly, the most important person in his life. Their hard work was paying off. The foundation was gaining traction, and donations started to come in from community members inspired by their mission. The media even took notice, and Ben found himself being interviewed by local reporters about his transition from high-powered lawyer to nonprofit founder. Mia stood beside him at every event, and her story added a raw, authentic touch that resonated with people. One evening, they hosted a gathering at a local community center to thank their supporters. Ben looked around, seeing familiar faces of people who had once struggled and were now rebuilding their lives with the help of open doors. He felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude, realizing how much the foundation had already achieved. As the event wound down, Mia pulled him aside, her eyes shining. "Look at this, Ben. Look at what you've created. You've given people hope, and you've given me hope too." He took her hand, his voice filled with sincerity. "This isn't just my work, Mia. It's ours. I couldn't have done this without you." They stood there in a comfortable silence, the warmth of their connection wrapping around them as the last guests filtered out. Ben felt a surge of courage, and before he could second-guess himself, he spoke. "Mia, I don't think I've ever really thanked you for trusting me, for letting me be here for you when you needed it. I want you to know that being with you, doing this work together, it's changed me. I don't want to imagine my life without you in it." Mia looked at him, a mixture of surprise and joy on her face. Her voice was soft, her words tentative but filled with warmth. "Ben, I've been afraid to believe in this in us, but I think I'm finally ready." For the first time in years, Ben allowed himself to be vulnerable, to open up to something that wasn't just about his career or achievements. The two of them stood there, a quiet understanding passing between them. They both knew that whatever had brought them together had created something lasting. Over the next few months, they grew even closer. The Open Doors initiative continued to expand, attracting national attention and even inspiring similar organizations in nearby cities. Ben's law firm eventually came around to support his work, acknowledging the value of his community contributions. Peter, once skeptical, offered to help with some of the foundation's legal needs, and Ben saw this as a bridge mending between them. As Ben and Mia's relationship blossomed, they spoke more openly about their future. Mia found peace in knowing that she was no longer alone and had a stable role in the foundation. She was grateful for the journey that had brought her here, and for the first time, she looked forward with optimism instead of fear. But one evening, as Ben prepared for a quiet dinner with Mia, he received an unexpected message. It was from a former colleague, someone who had been close to Marcus. The message was brief but unsettling. "Ben, I thought you should know. Marcus has been digging around your finances and the foundation's accounts. I think he's trying to find a way to discredit you." A chill ran down Ben's spine. He thought he had closed that chapter, and yet here Marcus was, circling back. Taking a steadying breath, Ben reminded himself of the strength he had gained through this journey. But this wasn't something he could hide from Mia. She deserved to know the truth. When Mia arrived for dinner, she immediately sensed something was wrong. "Ben, what's going on?" she asked, concern in her voice. He took her hand, guiding her to sit down at the table. "I just got a message from an old colleague. It seems that Marcus hasn't given up. He's been looking into our finances, possibly trying to create problems for the foundation." Mia's expression hardened, her protective instincts flaring. "How can he still do this? After everything you faced down?" Ben shook his head. "I don't know, but I do know one thing. He won't succeed. We've built this foundation with integrity, and he won't take that from us." "Not again." Mia nodded, a fierce determination in her eyes. "We'll go through every financial record, every account, and make sure everything is transparent. If Marcus wants a fight, we'll be ready." Over the following weeks, Ben and Mia meticulously reviewed all the foundation's finances, even enlisting the help of an accountant to ensure that everything was above board. Ben's legal background made it easier to spot any vulnerabilities, and together, they reinforced every aspect of the foundation's operations. They were prepared to confront Marcus if necessary, determined not to let him unravel what they had built. Then one evening, as they sat reviewing the final reports, Ben received another call. This time, it was Marcus himself, his voice filled with frustration. "Ben, I know what you're trying to do, but remember, people don't forget what you've done, no matter how many charities you start." Ben felt his patience thin as he replied, "Marcus, I'm done hiding from my past. If you want to expose it, go ahead, but you won't destroy what we've built. This foundation is about giving people hope. You don't get to take that away from them." There was a pause, and then Marcus let out a bitter laugh. "Fine, Ben. Keep pretending you're some kind of savior. But don't expect me to stop here." The line went dead, leaving Ben tense but resolute. He looked at Mia, who had been listening, and saw the same resolve mirrored in her face. "We're ready for whatever he tries next," she said firmly, her hand slipping into his. In that moment, Ben felt a deep sense of gratitude for Mia's strength and loyalty. Together, they had faced one battle after another, and he knew that, with her by his side, they could overcome anything Marcus threw at them. They were more than just partners in the foundation. They were a team, bound by something unbreakable. Ben and Mia braced themselves for whatever Marcus might attempt, but as weeks passed with no further interference, a sense of calm settled over them. The Open Doors initiative continued to flourish, and their reputation as a source of hope and support only grew stronger. Together, Ben and Mia found purpose and fulfillment in the lives they were able to impact. For Ben, the foundation had become more than just a project. It had redefined what he wanted from life. One evening, as they wrapped up an event at a local shelter, Ben pulled Mia aside. The people they had helped that night were still mingling in the background, sharing stories of hope and resilience. Ben took a deep breath, his gaze steady as he looked into Mia's eyes. "Mia, I've been thinking a lot lately about everything we've been through. We've faced down my past, your struggles, and even Marcus. And through it all, you've been there. I don't want to imagine going through life without you by my side." Mia's eyes softened, her hand reaching up to rest gently on his. "Ben, I never expected any of this. Not the foundation, not us. But I can't imagine my life without you either." He smiled, feeling his heart race as he spoke. "Then let's keep building this together. Not just the foundation, but a life. I want you by my side, for good." Mia looked at him, her eyes glistening with emotion. She nodded, her voice catching. "Yes, Ben, I want that too. More than anything." As they embraced, the world around them faded, leaving just the two of them in that moment of shared commitment and love. The foundation had been born from hardship, but it had brought them together, allowing them to heal and find something lasting in each other. In the following months, Ben and Mia moved forward with renewed purpose, not just as partners in the foundation, but as partners in life. They expanded the Open Doors initiative to include new programs for job training and housing assistance, reaching more people than they ever thought possible. The support from the community only grew, and soon, national organizations began seeking their advice, inspired by the change they were creating. As they worked, they often spoke about their future. They made plans to travel together, to see the world beyond the city that had both given them challenges and brought them back together. The foundation had rooted them, but they were ready to explore new horizons. Marcus's threats faded into memory, overshadowed by the strength of the life Ben and Mia had built. Ben had faced down his past, and with Mia by his side, he had turned that past into a foundation of hope for others. Together, they had created something unbreakable, a purpose that would outlast them both, a love that had grown from resilience and second chances. As they stood on the threshold of a new chapter, Ben realized he had found something more valuable than success, more meaningful than any victory in court. He had found a life filled with love, purpose, and the kind of happiness he had once believed was out of reach. And as he looked into Mia's eyes, he knew that he was finally home.